the PACCon logo. I put the PACCon logo in the chat in case anyone else wants to use it for their picture.
Great. So yeah, thank you so much. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me know if there are ever any issues at all. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone. So sorry for the technical difficulties. I'm still figuring out Wi-Fi and stuff, and it's just been a crazy day. But we're here now, and I'm excited to present for y'all. Yeah, Megan, I shared the presentation with you. Could you share your screen?
Yes, just opening it now. And actually, we're going to begin this session with a land acknowledgement. So on point for the session that we're actually participating in today. So I'm going to go ahead and open that on up. So we have it up on the screen for you to view in case you're visual learners as well. So I'm going to go ahead and read this and share the land acknowledgement we have today. So we, as Platt House, the PAC Shop, and PAC-Exec, want to begin this session with a voicing of gratitude to the past and present generations of Indigenous people for the opportunity to live our lives in this space. Although we're gathering on the internet, many of us are living and learning on Lenape-Hoking. We currently call this space Philadelphia, but this land was stolen from the Lenni Lenape tribe, the original stewards of this land. If you don't know the name and story of the people whose land you occupy, you can find that information and many other great resources at native-land.ca. And we'll go ahead and post that link in the chat. And just a quick shout out to Indigenous Peoples Day, which is coming up this Monday. So Connor, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing that screen, and then I'm going to start sharing your presentation. One sec. Now I get to experience my technical difficulty.
Megan, right now it's on the invitation email.
Yep. Okay, trying again. One sec.
No problem. Technical difficulties. It's on brand right now for us, so.
I think this is the right one now. Am I right?
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Connor. And I'll go ahead and start the slide presentation. Just a little bit of lag on the screen.
No problem.
Present. There we go. Go for it.
Great. Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Megan. Once again, thank you all of you for coming out to this, and I really appreciate it so much. I'm really excited to be talking to all of you about writing a land acknowledgement today. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. You can go to the next slide, Megan. Okay, great. So I want to just start off with some things about me, just so all of you know. So first off, pronouns are he, him, his. I'm majoring with a I'm majoring in communications with a concentration in marketing and messaging. My minor is Native American and Indigenous Studies, and on campus, I'm involved in a lot of different organizations. I'm the undergraduate chair of Natives of Penn. I am on the Performing Arts Council Executive Board as the Community Service Chair. Front Row Theater Company, I serve as a digital director. And Glee Club, I'm a singer, so I do a ton of different performing arts related stuff. I've also done acting, tech, and directing within TACI, the Theater Arts Council. And then on the pictures on the right of your screen. So on the top right, you see an emblem of the Lumbee tribe. That's my tribe. I'm of the Lumbee tribe, and we are the biggest tribe east of the Mississippi, located in like southern central North Carolina. To the left, you can see me. You can see an arrow pointing at me. That's me at actually the Indigenous Peoples Day March last year. We were able to do in person, sad, but we were able to do that last year, part of Natives at Penn. And Natives at Penn, of course, is the university's main Indigenous organization. Additionally, you can see the two photos on the bottom. Last year, I had the pleasure of directing Manahata, the university's first ever production, and also the first ever production, I believe, at any Ivy League university, directed by a student and student-led to focus on Indigenous people. It was a play. It was a beautiful play about that basically like contrasted Indigenous loss of land with the 2008 financial crisis. And to the left, you can see that is a photo of me and the cast and crew of the show. So yeah, I'm very grateful that I was able to go up about 2 weeks before everything happened with coronavirus. So I'm very grateful that that was able to happen last year. So yeah, Megan, you can go to the next slide. Okay, so some of you may not be aware of what land acknowledgement is. So I just want to inform everyone first off. A land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes and respects Indigenous people as traditional stewards of the land and the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. And that's from Northwestern University. Yeah, these land acknowledgements have a tendency to especially be used in front of in-person events, such as gatherings, performances, and also I'll talk a bit more about this. I know that Penn Admissions has also started including them in all of their events on campus. So that's the kind of format that they tend to be used in usually. But we'll talk a bit more about that soon. Megan, can you go to the next slide? Great. So first off, I just want to start by dispelling some misconceptions about Indigenous people. Because I think that's relevant to the conversation. First off, Native people are not extinct. They still exist throughout the country, and they also attend Penn. I am proof that they attend Penn, but I also know many others, including people in the performing arts, who attend Penn who are also Indigenous. This is kind of, there's this whole idea of Native invisibility that I have faced personally at Penn, where people either think that Native Americans are some sort of mythical species that doesn't exist, or they think that they are extinct or that they only live out west on reservations. This is not true at all. There are many in this area, many Indigenous people who live in this area. Many have been forced off their land, but some people of the Lenape tribe even still live in the area, and some even in Penn. So they really do all live here. Not all Indigenous communities are the same. Each has their own culture, history, and ways of life. This is really, really crucial for everyone to know. It's not like all of us are living in teepees on a reservation with a totem pole and hunting for our own food. It really varies from tribe to tribe and Indigenous entities. In the US alone, I believe there's almost 600 different Indigenous entities. So that each with their own cultures, way of life, all that different stuff. So that's important to realize. Indigenous individuals do not only exist in North America. Indigeneity is universal across every continent except Antarctica. I feel like this is something people don't really realize. They tend to think that the Americas, especially, are where Indigenous people live, but they live in truly every continent. The photo to the right is actually of the Sami people. They are located in the Norway, Finland, Sweden region, and they are one of the main Indigenous communities in Europe. So they really Indigenous people exist all across the world. And lastly, I just want to point out that blood quantum does not indicate an individual's nativeness. I'm sure some of you are wondering what blood quantum is. And like that basically means when you're like, oh, I'm like a 16th Cherokee princess, or I'm half Native American, or asking someone how Native American they are. In Indigenous communities, that does not define how Native you are. There's actually many different instances of Indigenous people adopting individuals from other tribes, but even like individuals who do not identify at all Native, or does not have any Native ancestry, and take them into their tribe. And if you grow up in that culture, frequently you'll be considered a member of that tribe. So this whole idea of blood quantum and asking about it is actually really a Western European concept that frankly has been imposed on a lot of Indigenous people to force them to conform to a lot of governmental standards, and also kind of has led to the erasure of a lot of Native people. So blood quantum does not at all define that sort of thing. And also, it's important to know that that can also be a bit of microaggression for some Native individuals to hear that so frequently, or to hear that they are not Native enough. That's something that can be really frustrating. So yeah, and also on the photo on the left is actually a photo of someone from my tribe, the Lumbee tribe. So yeah, Megan, you can go to the next slide now. Great. So what are the purposes of land acknowledgements? Well, first off, they give recognition to the original stewards of the territory. They also acknowledge an institution's problematic colonial history, and they can also be super helpful for starting to help mend and heal that relationship. And lastly, they also serve as a statement of support to show that you are an ally with the Indigenous community. So yeah, those are the main purposes. And I also think that it's really important because in giving that recognition and giving that simple statement, you are also helping resist Native erasure and Native invisibility by making sure that Native voices are visible and not being left out of the conversation. And to the right, there's photos of Indigenous people from all over the world for Indigenous Peoples Day, I believe in 2019. So yeah, next slide, Megan, please. So yeah, so why should you conduct a land acknowledgement? So I think first off, it is a way to honor the original inhabitants of the land. That's a really key thing, because I think it's, once again, it's lost on so many people whose land you're sitting on, and that Indigenous people, that they had this land at one point in time. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge that and honor that. It helps resist Native invisibility, as I talked about. It also generates a dialogue about the history of Indigenous people, especially in this area. One important part about doing a land acknowledgement is doing a history of the area you're in. And I know I've done that personally for Philadelphia. As Megan said at the start of this, we sit on the land of the Lenni Lenape, also known as Lenape-Hoking, land of the Lenape. And their land stretches from about like Manhattan to a bit south of Philly. And they were unfortunately like kicked off, many of them were kicked off this land through the Walking Purchase. I believe that's the name of it, the Walking Purchase, with William Penn's son, who actually, he basically said, they basically made a deal that he would get the land within walking distance of like west of the Schuylkill or something. And what he ended up doing was then he hired professional like runners, and also I think even people on horseback could just run as fast as they can out west. And that ended up taking like tons more acres and miles than Lenape ever thought they were giving up. So that's an example of kind of like some of the history of the area. And I think it's important to be mindful of that, and creating dialogue around that can really start with these sorts of statements. Lastly, it can also help institutions begin to heal historical wrongs. I think Penn definitely has its issues in regards to the history of Indigenous people. I think luckily they are still working with us to try and ensure that Indigenous people are visible on campus, but there's still a long way to go. And I definitely do have some criticisms of the way that they've dealt with Indigenous people in the past. And I think that this is a really phenomenal way to help begin healing that relationship. And then the photo to the left is also of the Maori tribe as a tribe located in New Zealand. Megan, next slide, please. Great, so how do you create a land acknowledgement? So there's three main steps. First off, you want to learn about the area. So like what I talked about, like who are the original inhabitants here at Lenape, but I think it's also important to be mindful of where all your members are coming from if you were to do this before a performance event, and acknowledge that sort of thing. And also look into the history. And this is actually mentioned by Megan at the start, but native-land.ca is a phenomenal resource for getting started with this. I could spend hours looking on it. It's really a comprehensive map of the different Indigenous groups, languages, and also treaties in the area that helps give you a lot of histories. And it also it encompasses the entire world. So it really can give you histories about even your own hometown and where you're living and if there are Indigenous people there. The next step is that you articulate a statement. In these statements, oftentimes land acknowledgements can recognize Native elders, mention the occupation of a territory, reference broken treaties, or imply a reciprocal and caring interaction with the land. So there is no checklist of what you need to include in a land acknowledgement, but there's a range of things that you can include. Lastly, conduct the land acknowledgement and inform individuals about the land they live on and they sit on and learn on. And I think that's really important. Do that sort of thing and create that dialogue. And to the right, that is a photo of some elders from the Navajo Nation. Megan, next slide, please. So yeah, I wanted to share Penn Admissions land acknowledgement with all of you to give you a sense of what this can look like in action. So it says that Philadelphia occupies the traditional homelands of the Lenni Lenape and acknowledges and expresses gratitude to the Indigenous people of this land, past and present, for the opportunity to live and learn on Lenape-Hoking, land of the Lenape. So you can see how they acknowledge, and they're also expressing gratitude for being able to live and learn. I think this is an example of how land acknowledgements don't even need to be that long. They can be short, but they can be brief, but you're able to get at this point that this is whose lands you're sitting on, and we want to just acknowledge our gratitude and express how honored we are to be able to live alongside these people and live and learn. And these can really be this simple. And they tend to use these, from my understanding, of Penn admissions before any sort of admissions related event, like Q&A, that sort of thing. Megan, next slide, please. Okay, so here is some just important disclaimers about conducting a land acknowledgement. I think it's really, really crucial that it not feel like just another piece of protocol or an event. By this, I mean, it shouldn't be, it's like when you're on an airplane and like the flight attendants always give that spiel of like, buckle your seatbelts, check the guide, like if anything is happening with the plane, like look for your nearest exits. What people do is they tune out. They don't listen to this sort of thing. They don't want to hear this sort of thing. They don't want to hear the sort of information because they feel like they hear it all the time. And I think it can feel like it's a part of protocol, something that you need to get out of the way with and no one really cares about it. This should not be that. And this should not feel like, oh, I memorized this, let me just say it out there because we have to get through it to get to the actual show. You should always be mindful whenever you're conducting these land acknowledgements to ensure that they are done in a way that is being mindful and thoughtful of the land you're sitting on. I know that sounds kind of vague, but I think it's really important that you just be mindful of that and look for ways to do it so you are not just repeating what you've been told, but you're actually engaging with the history, and you're also encouraging others to engage with the history. And you can even like interact with audiences if you're interested in doing that sort of thing. You don't necessarily have to, and I know that can take up some time, but I think really just imploring people to be mindful of that and not treating it as just another piece of repetitive spiel that you have to give out, I think is really, really crucial. Next, land acknowledgements are not for only in-person gatherings. And of course, like I know we're doing this online and on Zoom, that's an example of how this has been done, but usually these are done in events or like gatherings or performances from what I've seen that are in person. But there's also now new movements that also incorporate this into a lot more facets of life. Like for example, my teacher who runs the Indigenous Studies program, I know one thing that she's been really like pushing for more people to do is just add even a land acknowledgement into an email to acknowledge where you're even sending emails and stuff like that as a part of her signature. And I think that can be really helpful because even in these, we forget literally how much we do on land that frankly tends to be stolen from Indigenous people. And I think it's really, really important to be mindful of that and not lose sight of how quite literally, like the land we live on, the way things are structured in our world are constantly inspired by the way Native people live their lives, like even just the names around us. And it's really just important to be mindful of that and bring that to other facets of life. Lastly, I think it's really, really important to point out that anybody can and should give land acknowledgement. What I mean by this is that you should not seek out an Indigenous person to constantly do this. I think it can be nice to have an Indigenous person doing this, and I think that is very well intentioned and trying to be very respectful. But as one of the main Native people on campus that people know of, and as one of the leaders of Natives of Penn on campus, I know it's happened to me very frequently that I've gotten a request not only from Penn, but even from Drexel and Temple to actually go and conduct land acknowledgements for them. And I understand the intention that it's something that you really want to be respectful of and have someone from the Indigenous community do this, but this is about creating a dialogue with everyone. And I think in order to make this a dialogue with everyone, you shouldn't always be expecting Indigenous people to go out of their way to do it as well, if that makes sense. I think that's a really, really crucial thing that people need to be a bit more mindful of, because otherwise you're just making, it feels like you can just be making Native people do all the labor when everybody should be helping share the labor and acknowledging whose land you're sitting on. And to the right, that is a photo of the Inuit tribe located in like northern coastal Alaska area. Yeah, next slide, please, Megan. So lastly, I just want to point out how land acknowledgements are meaningless without actual Native allyship and support. I think there can be a tendency to feel like, oh, we just put this land acknowledgement together and we're done. We did we did what we needed to for the Indigenous community and the Native community. Great, we're good. That should not, in my opinion, it really is meaningless without Native allyship and support, because that's a really nice, gesture. Yet there needs to be actual action taking to help also build Native voices and expand Native voices, especially in a world where like I think us as Natives feel so invisible to the world. Like even like I was like the fact that I was looking at some politicians' websites the other day. They look at their campaign platform, and the fact that I saw some information on their policies regarding Indian country or areas where it's largely predominantly Indigenous, that made me feel like, I feel like that's honestly it's a bare minimum, but at the same time, that made me really happy to be seen. And I think it's really important that we continue to elevate Native voices because they just feel that invisible. So land acknowledgement should really only be the first step of any sort of process of helping ally with and support Indigenous people. And I think a key way to go about making sure that it is not the only step is researching and learning more about the Indigenous community in your area and finding ways that they want support from the greater community. And like in Philadelphia, of course, as you refer to the Lenape community, who are like there's a pretty sizable Lenape community in the area, and I think that there's many ways you can help support them. But also on the other side, there's also ways that you can also even support Natives of Penn. For instance, right now we actually have a petition out imploring Penn to actually recognize Indigenous Peoples Day instead of Columbus Day, coming up in the next few days. And we're just sending out and getting petitions, and I think that is a key way that you can go about just give it, it's like literally 5 seconds, but by signing it, you are helping in so many ways, and that's the way. That's one of the ways that you can just help out with them. And I can actually send out that link afterwards if you're interested in actually signing it. And then I think it's just important to constantly be thinking about how you can actively contribute to Native visibility and how you can elevate Native voices. I think once again, that goes towards a lot of what I talked about. Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, someone put the change.org petition in the comments. So yeah, please sign that. I really cannot tell you how much I would appreciate it. But yeah, Megan, you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so I just wanted to open up the floor because we have a few more minutes, and I just want to know if anyone has any questions, points of clarification, comments, anything like that.
Yeah, Connor, I have a question. So first of all, thank you so much for sharing all of this. I think a lot of it's like things I've never really thought about. And so, okay, so I have two questions. So one, you mentioned like how your professor or someone like mentioned about like email signatures. So like, what does that exactly look like? And then two, as a like PAC group, so not individually, but as a PAC group, how can you see them like actively getting more involved besides just like writing a land agreement, right? And like learning about like the history of our land.
So yeah, I think it starts with, okay, first off with email. With emails, I know what my teacher does is she acknowledges that.
Connor, you're muted.
Connor, you're muted. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, great. Can you hear me now? If you're good.
Yeah, you're good.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Just kidding. You got muted again.
Yeah. I don't know what happened. I don't know what just happened. Okay. So I know what my teacher does is, yeah, she does land acknowledgements in her emails. She acknowledges some of the history of the land that she's sitting on. And she's just basically saying that, like, I know that I personally sent this email from this location. These are some of the treaties that have unfortunately forced Indigenous people off. And I think it's really important that we continue acknowledging this sort of thing. I think that's like the general gist. I can give you more. I can also send out like an email with more of these resources about like ways you can go about doing this. But that's kind of the whole general idea. And I think I would really just heavily recommend looking into Indigenous communities in the area. I'm sure you can find their websites and that sort of thing, and finding what sort of activism work they're doing and seeing ways that you can help elevate their voices and making sure that you are doing things to help support them in any way possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Connor, We had a question
Yep.
that came up in the chat box
Mhm.
that maybe you can help and maybe Platt House can also help answer. So this is from Serena. Thank you, Serena. More of a question to PAC. Is PAC going to highly suggest or mandate all the clubs do land acknowledgements for shows? Keep in mind the possible performativity if clubs are not supporting the Native community as well. Thank you for the really thoughtful question.
I think as of right now, it's something that we are heavily recommending to PAC groups. What we've started ever since, I think right before spring break last year, we started incorporating it into PAC GBM. So we always start with a land acknowledgement from now on. And I know when I directed Manahata with Front Row Theater Company, that was the first time I think a land acknowledgement has been done within a PAC group that I know of. So I don't think we're not necessarily going to be mandating it, I don't think, but I think as of right now, we're just heavily recommending that you at least look into writing one and learning more about that. And we would really love to see more groups actually engaging in that sort of thing.
Thanks, Connor. And I'll just add on to say that if PAC, just with the question of mandate specifically, I did air quotes, but you can't see that, that PAC would have to vote on that PAC-wide if it were something that were to be added to the Constitution. So that would have to be something that, you know, people supported. But I think, like Connor said, it shouldn't be performative. And like you said, Serena, that point as well. So definitely it's a great idea. It's something that we would love to see happening and we will recommend. And that's part of the reason why we're hosting this session during PACCon, but not mandated.
Yeah, are there any other questions?
Yeah, I have one. So
Okay, we're good.
for groups that are filming like in multiple states or multiple locations for their shows this semester, do you have any thoughts on how to like best structure a land acknowledgement that's going to end up acknowledging multiple spaces and multiple lands and be as like clear about that as possible?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know what we've been doing for our GBM so far is acknowledging that like while we are in like cyberspace, many of us are calling it from the Lenape lands. I think one way to go about it would be looking into like who most people's land is currently, but I think also it's really important to actually look into all of those different communities. I guess if that makes sense for all the different people who are living across the country or across the world to see if they are sitting on someone's lands. And I think incorporating that, I think would be really, really helpful to state at the start that like this production was filmed on the lands of these different communities. And like also like inserting some information about why those communities might have been forced off their lands or broken treaties or stuff like that. And also really just thanking those communities for giving you the opportunity to live and learn on their land. I think that's what I would recommend. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful.
Connor, I have a question, if that's okay. So like today we, you know, did a spoken land acknowledgement. We also had the text up. I'm wondering, do you have thoughts on is there like differences between spoken land acknowledgements, written land acknowledgements? Is that something to include like in say a program or on, you know, in a different format? Does it have a different kind of meeting or anything like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen also, I know Penn Admissions does this as well. They also have a written land acknowledgement actually just sitting among like above mantle. I've seen it in many different actually theaters. It's also been a thing that in addition to just saying it before shows, they also have like plaques acknowledging whose lands that they're sitting on. So I've seen that that's also a big trend on the rise as well, is in addition to spoken land acknowledgements, you can also have written ones. I think that it's really helpful to have those, but I think of the two, personally for me, I think it's more important to have the spoken one because there can be a sort of passivity with plaques that you don't get so much with actually like hearing it out loud. And I think the plaques can be very, very helpful, and having that written in a program or something like that, I think is really, really helpful. But I think to make sure that gets out to the most people as possible, I would really, at least especially heavily emphasize doing a spoken version. But I think also like written versions also can be really, really helpful for those people who are reading that. But I just, yeah. Are there any other questions? If they're not, I can put my email in the chat, and like if you have any other questions and you want to put them there, like please do not hesitate to reach out. Yeah, I think that's it. Let me just put this in the chat. Wait.
Connor, I wanted to thank you for your labor. I know how exhausting it is to represent an entire community at somewhere like Penn. So thank you so much for giving this presentation and for everything you do on campus and off campus.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Like it's taking me a lot, but I think that's really rewarding to be able to give. It can be rewarding to be able to help educate. So yeah, thank you so much for showing up. I'm really honored by the amount of people who came to this. Really, thank you all so much.
Thank you, Connor. Thank you for an incredible presentation. Thank you for all your hard work. And thank you for everyone who joined the session today. The session has been recorded and will be available to be viewed again and to be shared, you know, with your group members, with your communities, with your subcommittees, wherever you'd like to share it out. We'd love to see this word spread and Connor's great work be shared. So thank you, everyone. And hopefully we'll see you at some other sessions this weekend.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Connor.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Connor.